As I mentioned, Dr. Anthony Clark is going to speak first this morning. Dr. Clark is an agricultural climatologist who has worked nationally and internationally in a range of weather forecasting services, including quantifying the impacts of climate change on different agricultural sectors. He has a strong understanding of weather drivers and leads a team that is developing decision support tools to allow producers to respond to both short and long-term weather impacts. He also heads up the Enhanced Drought Information System, which monitors statewide seasonal conditions. I'm sure you'll understand he's been extremely busy the last little while, and so I'm very pleased that he's able to join us this morning. Anthony?
Thanks, Todd, and welcome everyone to the seminar. My job today is to set the scene for Jeff. Jeff's going to get into the good stuff, the real nitty-gritty of what's required out on the ground. So I'm just going to provide a bit of a situation update. Where are we? There we go. So I'm going to provide a bit of a situation update, which takes us up to mid-October. I will very, very quickly show some work in progress we're doing around a survey at farm dams, some really interesting stuff. So just to really set the scene at a very high level, you know, where are we at the moment and what's the prognosis going forward? Over the past month and a half, we have seen some significant rainfall and some corresponding growth in some regions. It's very regional. Parts of the northern tablelands, pretty much the coastal strip from particularly the far north coast down to about Wollongong, large areas of the Sydney Basin, parts of the central tablelands and the southern Alpine region, and parts of that sort of tableland nestled into the mountains there. Really importantly, if you've been storm watching like I have, you'll have seen a lot of this rainfall's come as cellular storms, a lot of, you know, what we call convective rainfall, and it has a sort of eye in it, and you get 50, you know, really heavy falls in isolated areas, and it can really just fall off. So that even though we've described these broad areas of recovery, there is a lot of variability in regions within those zones. Importantly, if you're looking at the drought maps and drought indicators and our prognosis of drought, we're still classifying some of these regions in a less intense drought category. We're still calling it drought or drought affected. The reason for that is it's going to take time for the soil moisture to build. We have been managing quite a severe soil moisture deficit, and it's not until we get to sort of 60, 70 and beyond in terms of relative soil moisture that we've got bankable production going forward. You know, that at that time the risks in the systems in terms of rainfall limitation and moisture limitation fall away. And we've got that at least 6 to 8 weeks of bankable production. We're not seeing that everywhere. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of variability within this zone. So there's this question mark: are we at the start or in the midst of a strong recovery? And definitely there are parts of, particularly the high rainfall zone, where there's a lot of evidence for that. Or is this going to be a false recovery? We'll get this sort of green flush, but we'll hit summer and things will just senesce and burn off, and we're really back to where we were. So even in these areas where we are getting rainfall, you know, that's a really important question. Really importantly, there are large parts of the state that have missed out. You know, particularly up in the northwest, parts of the central west, in particular west of the Warrumbungles, you know, west of Coonabarabran there, northwest of Coonabarabran, up to Walgett and around. Parts of the Riverina and Murray are becoming more concerning. It's probably fair to say things have been seasonally dry. They've had a dry period, but that's actually in parts of the Riverina and Murray becoming more severe. you know, and a severe soil moisture deficit in parts of those areas still persists. Just an overview of the forecast. We actually saw some improved odds for rainfall in the last forecast period. Here we're talking about the chances of rainfall over the coming season, so the 3 months out until December. We have been tracking it around, you know, this probability of 25% of getting above median rainfall in that period. That actually shifted last month to around about a 50-50. Some forecasting services are talking about increased chance of an El Nino forming in that time frame. Really importantly, really what's driving that is probably the weight of the 8 or 9 international climate models that they look at to do forward prognosis. The weight shifted towards, you know, that El Nino forecast. It's really, you know, it used to be 2 or 3 out of the 8 models. It's now 5 out of the 8 models. So it's still a very weak forecast. The other issue there, a late onset El Nino, if it was to form, there's a less clear relationship between a late onset El Nino and low rainfall probabilities. What we're starting to talk about is this scenario of what we call false recovery or high regional variability. I'll just go on to the next slide. We've done a bit of thinking about, you know, this question of will the drought break or will it continue? If it does break, what might it look like from a whole of state point of view? And we've devised sort of 4 main scenarios that we look at. The first one being a rapid, strong break. If people remember the drought breaking in 1982, now what happened there is an ex-tropical low came and parked itself pretty much over New South Wales, and it rained everywhere for 3 to 4, 5 days. And we had a really sudden shift in that water balance, if you like. That's actually a low probability event. Events like that, you know, these storm cells migrating from the north are actually quite low. The other scenario we look at is similar, but it happens much later. You know, this ex-tropical low comes in the midst of summer, for example, and so there's much more reduced effectiveness of rainfall at that time, particularly in the southern parts of the state. If we are to get rainfall like that in the north of the state, you know, it tends to come as high variability storms, so it's much more patchy. And we've assigned a low to medium probability. The third scenario, the one we call false recovery, you know, the current synoptic patterns are dominating our climate system at the moment. We haven't got a strong signal from the oceans. The El Nino doesn't know what it's doing. We haven't got a strong signal in the Indian Ocean. So it's really local synoptic patterns that are driving things. And when those big drivers aren't there, we get a lot of regional variability. And I've highlighted that there because that's actually what's playing out, this scenario at the moment. You know, high regional variability, a lot of some regions and parts of regions doing well, others not. Bit of a nightmare for our team. It's incredibly hard to monitor this type of patchy rainfall. The other one is, you know, drought continuing. Late El Nino forms, and does happen to be accompanied by you know, very low rainfall. We've given that a medium probability of occurring. That's a bit of a nightmare scenario for everyone. So there are 4 main planning scenarios, and like I said, it's that third one there that we think.
Jeff Casburn has worked for New South Wales DPI for more than 20 years in Goulburn, Bourke and Wagga Wagga. He has a well-developed knowledge of integrated livestock and cropping systems. Jeff has a keen interest in livestock production from pastures combined with practical experience in drought feeding systems and lamb feedlotting. He produces the New South Wales DPI gross margins for a range of sheep enterprises and is very passionate about agriculture in the rural community, as anyone that knows Jeff can vouch for. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Todd. I just want to start off with a bit of an apology. I went fishing on the weekend, and the only thing I was able to catch was the flu, so I'll do my best not to cough into the microphone. But also, it was interesting to listen to. What was that? Sorry. Also like to thank Anthony for his brief run through of the current climatic conditions. But I just thought I might just start by just a quick bit of a summary of what Anthony was saying. And for many people, there's been really little or no pasture leading into spring. Like we said, there was little winter rainfall and autumn was dry. People have been really sort of hanging out for the spring, hoping that spring would come, but unfortunately for many it's really been a total failure, and for some a partial failure. Obviously some have been lucky enough to get some rain recently. The question will be is what benefits will that bring, and without follow-up rain we've really got to be careful about how we utilise that feed that's growing, because if it does remain dry, if it is a false break, ground cover is really important. And if you've been feeding and you stop feeding, well, you've got to get stock back onto feed again, and you've really got to think about using that pasture wisely until you're really quite confident that it isn't a false break. Like Anthony said, you know, for many water is running out, and that's a real issue for some. And the real question, I suppose, for many is summer rain and pasture growth. For us down in the south of the state, we don't get a lot of growth over summer anyway, because it's hot and dry. We are lucky if we got lucerne. If you're in the north, that's when you generally do get your growth, but it's really questionable about whether we're going to get a great deal of rain. We certainly do know that we're coming from a long way behind in terms of subsoil moisture and ground cover, and also it might take a fair bit of time for our pastures really to recover. And so the real question is when do we really believe we're likely to get a break? And that's a really hard and difficult question to answer, and that's one that we're going to try and work through today. So it really comes down to it's crunch time. No longer can we sort of be hanging out for spring, because spring's here and it hasn't achieved what we want it to do. So we've really got to think about, you know, how we're going to get through next year and beyond. And it's really important to get a long-term strategy into place. Now, this is a really very simple formula. Obviously, we've got profit, and it's having income greater than our variable and fixed costs. Now, obviously, our income comes through the sale of meat and wool, both the sheep and cattle. And we've been in a really fortunate position over the last couple of years that we've been able to get good incomes because the value of our commodities has really been quite high. And we've also had some good seasons along with that, which meant that we've had pretty good stocking rates. And that income sometimes can be, you know, 2 times higher than our variable costs. So in the brackets there, we've got variable and fixed costs. And variable costs are those costs that go up and down with our livestock numbers. So that could be drench costs, it could be shearing costs, and most importantly, it's feeding costs. And our fixed costs are those costs that stay relatively stable from year to year, and they include things like rates, electricity, repairs and maintenance, and most importantly, interest on loans. So in good years and in normal years, you know, we expect and we've received relatively good profit, and that profit really gets used for either retiring some of our debt level, and just as importantly, used into savings, which can then help us through tough times like we're facing now with drought. Now, early in drought, generally our main focus is on the variable costs, and really the main focus has been having really efficient making really efficient feeding decisions so that we can reduce the amount of money that we're spending on feeding animals. But at some point, you know, we start considering maybe selling some or all of our livestock. And that's for two reasons. One is that we've got this really huge feed bill and we're thinking, how can we continue paying this? And secondly, we also are able to get a little bit of income from that extra sale of animals. However, though, the trouble is the fixed costs keep rolling in. And at some point for the business to recover, we've basically got to get back to full production levels so that we can get our income being greater than our variable and fixed costs, so that we can really start to meet our increasing debt levels. So the first question is will the cost of getting back to full production be greater, so basically buying animals back, than the cost of feeding until the drought breaks? Like I said before, working out what's going to happen in terms of the drought is a really difficult thing to do. But it is important. We do have some tools which will help us. So the first tool that we have is the kitchen table, and I can't stress this strong enough. The planning is best done with others, and the kitchen table signifies that. And so really, it's about sitting down with all members of the business and your advisors and sort of weighing up when the most likely planning period is going to be. Now, that's going to be different for different areas of the state, like I said. Thinking about what the best case scenario is and what potentially the worst case scenario could be. And then thinking about what are those feasible solutions. The other important thing about the kitchen table is that all members of the family worry about drought, and they can see and feel the impact that it's having, one, on the farm, but two, on the people that are dealing with that. And a smart farmer once said to me, a problem's only a problem when you're not doing anything about it. So it's really important that everyone in the family and in the business understand how the problem is actually being addressed. And that way they can see that, you know, you are working through the process, and that it'll help put people's minds at rest. So once we've thought about the most likely planning period in our worst and best case scenarios, so we can start crunching some numbers to work out whether or not it's actually going to be better to sell some or all animals now and buy back when the drought breaks, or whether it's going to be better to feed. And that's commonly called a sort of like a break-even situation. I'm going to go through a couple of scenarios now, but I just want to stress that everyone's going to have different assumptions. And I'm just going to show you a very quick process that people can go through themselves and change the assumptions to best fit what they believe things will be. So the first scenario that I'm going through is ewes, selling or maintaining your breeding flock. So in this case, I've got a current value of the ewe at $140 per head. And I've also worked out it's going to cost me $55 to maintain those animals for 6 months. And I use the drought feed calculator to do that. And I am feeding wheat with an energy of 12.5 megajoules and approximately 600 grams per head per day. I've also then thought, well, what are my variable costs over that next 6-month period? And that calculated out to be about $10. And that included shearing costs, because they've got 6 months wool now, and I'm going to be shearing towards the start of next year sometime. And so that's $10 worth of variable costs there. And I've also got income coming in through the sale of that wool, which is $40 worth of wool. So basically, when I add the current value of the animal plus my feed cost of $55 plus $10 for variable costs, and then I minus the income that I'm going to get from those animals, it gives me a break-even price of $165 if the drought continues for the next 6 months and I'm required to fully feed them. If, however, the drought continues on and I'm forced to feed for the next 9 months, well, the feed cost goes from $55 to $83, and so the break-even price increases to $193. Through that period as well, though, I'm going to join those ewes, so I need to account for those ewes having an increased nutritional requirement in the last month of pregnancy, and so that increases the feed cost to $90, which means the break-even price will be $200 at that end of that period. So now that I'm armed with this information, I can think, well, do I think a ewe that is late pregnant is going to be worth more than $200 in 9 months' time or not? And I can make that decision whether I want to buy or sell at the moment. There's a few assumptions there that you can look at. And the most important one is that I've used a grain price of $500 a tonne landed on farm. Now that is somewhere within a ballpark. You can get grain from Grain Corp at sites from Brocklesby in the south of the state through to Parks, Werris Creek and Canamble, and they range in price from $455 up to $490. Again, though, it's about people putting in their own assumptions. The second break-even price I wanted to look at was if I wanted to finish lambs. So I've put in the current value of $120 again, and they're 35 kilograms in live weight. And I want to take those animals to 45 kilograms, so I want to put in 10 kilograms of live weight. And to do that, it's going to cost me $36 to feed. Now, basically how I worked that out was that I used a feed conversion ratio of 6 kilograms of feed for 1 kilogram of live weight. So that means I'm going to have to feed them 60 kilograms of feed to achieve that 10 kilos live weight. Now, 6-to-1 is a fairly good feed conversion ratio, so that means that you have a balanced diet for energy and protein, and you're doing things really quite well. I've also got $5 worth of variable cost there, which also includes 3% shy feeders. And when I do the maths, that equates to $161 break-even price. So I can either sell them now for $120, or I can feed them with the hope that I'll get more than $161 at the end of that period. If, however, my feed conversion ratio wasn't quite as good, so it was taking me 7 kilos of feed for every kilogram live weight, I would need to feed 70 kilos, which would cost $42, which lifts the break-even price to $167 for that period. So it just gives a basic guide as to say, well, how efficient is my feeding process? And if I use that sort of process to calculate it, I'll get somewhere within a ballpark. Now, I used $600 as a total ration cost, and that was using pellets and with a roughage source, and those pellets were high energy and high protein. But I did not calculate any labour that would be involved with that, or infrastructure, feed out costs, or interest on funds borrowed or earned. Now let's have a look at cows. In this case, talking with Todd, we've settled on a cow of 450 kilos, so she's probably a D1, I think Todd was suggesting. So they're in relatively light condition, and we've put a value on her of $720, and that's based on recent market values of $1.60 a kilogram live weight. And using the drought feed calculator, we've worked out that it's going to cost $660 to feed that animal for 6 months to maintain her. Now that is assuming that we're using wheat and hay with an energy of 9 megs of energy at $550 landed on farm. We've also, which equates to about 6.7 kilograms per head per day. And we're going to have, for that next 6 months, $10 worth of variable cost. So that equates to $1,390 worth of break even. So we could either sell her now for $720, or we could feed her. And we need to get to buy in. If we can buy in animals less than $1,390 at the end of 6 months, in this scenario, we would be better off selling. If we can't, we might consider keeping them. We also did a sensitivity analysis saying, well, instead of having a per $550 landed price, what happens if it would be $450 landed? That brings the break-even price back to $1,270. What about if we fed a ration? It was 50% wheat and 50% of the wheat and hay and 50% grain. And so we've got the wheat and hay at $450 landed, and we've got the grain at $500 landed. That equates to a feed cost for that period of $460, which brings the break-even price back to $1,190. What happens if we, instead of feeding a 50-50 mix, we decided to feed 20% wheat and hay at $450 and 80% of the diet as wheat at $500, so it's a 20-80 mix. That brings the feed cost back to $422 or a break-even of $1,150. So as we can see, depending on how much we're paying for our feed and how efficiently we've got our feeding system, we can actually reduce the costs of feeding. And as you can see there, if down this area of the woods, there's plenty of hay being made, and there's talk of canola hay being from $300 and $330 a tonne. As an example, if you're able to get wheat and hay for around $350 a tonne landed, that would bring your break even back to $1,150. Now, one thing these calculations don't include is wastage, either for feeding out hay or for feeding out grain. So with grain, you get a bit more wastage if you're feeding on the ground, obviously, but also depending on the grain type, some of that grain passes through undigested, and so that can range between 10 and 15%. Probably 15% is probably a good thing that you could use. Again, there's been no calculated interest on funds borrowed or earned. The final break-even was for weaner steers. In this case, we had weaner steers at 150 kilos, and we're thinking about taking them through to 280 kilos live weight. So we valued those animals at $420 at $2.80 per kilogram. And again, we've used the same principle of a feed conversion. And in this case, we're using a feed conversion ratio of 6:1. So that equates to, because we're putting 130 kilograms live weight that means that at 6 kilos of feed for every kilogram of live weight, we're going to need to feed 780 kilograms of feed, which equates to $470, plus $10 worth of variable cost. So that brings the break-even price up to $900. And we can equate that to about $3.20 per kilogram live weight. If, however, our feed conversion ratio was only 7:1, we would need 910 kilograms of feed, costing $546, and a break-even of $976, or approximately $3.50 a kilogram live weight. So that just gives a bit of an indication of how you can do the sums to work out whether or not it's going to be feasible to pay for production feeding with weaner steers. Again, the assumptions are written there. Some of the things that we haven't included, even though we did some sensitivity on price, obviously if the drought continues to get worse, it's likely that feed prices could rise. We also haven't taken into consideration the quality of the animals that we have on farm and the likelihood of being able to buy those animals back. And we obviously as well haven't, like I've said before, calculated interest on funds borrowed or earned. So we go through that process and we start working out whether it's likely to pay to either sell some or all our animals, or whether it's likely to feed some or all. Now, it really comes down to an individual decision, because every circumstance is different. Anthony's already spoken about rainfall situations and how that varies across the state, but also it comes down to what assumptions you want to use for your calculations, and more importantly, what your personal business circumstances are, and we need to consider those. One thing that's really common with all the businesses across the state, to recover from drought, like I said before, we've got to try and get back to full production as soon as possible. And that's with that calculation or formula, that's getting our income back so that the income is greater than our variable and our fixed costs. Obviously, when we go through a drought, we've increased our debt levels, so our fixed costs are also increasing. So the longer it takes for us to get back to full production, getting that income, the greater our debt becomes, and the longer it will take for us to recover. And recovery is about being able to retire debt, but just as importantly, it's building our ability to withstand other periods in the future where we might get some dry periods. So there's a number of options for that. For some people who have decided to keep all their animals and feed, it's likely they might have had lower lambing or calving successes. And so they might decide that they're going to keep some of their productive ewes or cows a little bit longer so that they can keep their production up there. For others that have sold some, this might also be an option as well, so they can sort of get back to production a bit quicker. Others might decide, who have sold, that they might start trading animals, which will mean that they will delay purchases of animals, or it means that they can breed back, and which will take a bit longer, but still get to that sort of optimum income level. Others might decide to buy back before mob mentality kicks in. And Roger Fletcher said during the drought, that's when he made his money. And so people that make decisions before before the mob often can buy animals before the price really starts to skyrocket. Obviously, you take a risk if the drought continues on for much longer, but that's certainly an option for those people that have sold, to get back in before everyone thinks about it. Another option is for people to increase their cropping area, and also there's the option of getting agistment. So we're now at the point of really sort of nutting down our strategy. And like I said before, in normal years and in good years, it's really assessing what is the strength of your business. How profitable is it, and how many reserves, or what's the amount of reserves that business has to carry forward? Now, if your business is struggling over the last few years in good years due to excess debt levels, you might not have the option to get access funds to pay for increased feeding costs. So the only option you have is really to sell. And the sooner that decision is made, the better. There is nothing worse than being forced to sell your animals because you can no longer afford to feed them. And so that decision needs to be made as soon as possible. And the only way that you can really do that is to take a good hard look at your business performance. Now, many people do cash flow budgets, and it's really important to update that cash flow budget. So include all your feed costs and what you expect, the income that you expect to get for the rest of the year, because that can really give you an indication of how you're going to go this year. But it's then important to do your projected cash flow for next year and the year after, especially if you've sold animals or your reproductive performance hasn't been as good as you expect, because that will tell you what your likely cash shortfalls are going to be. And when you're armed with this information, when you go to talk to your bank to see what support they can provide you, you're going to give them the confidence that you've got a strategy developed. And it's also really important then that you speak with your bank regularly to keep them up to date. So, what's going on here? So, basically, where we got to at the end now is that hopefully you'll have developed a strategy for the longer term. And armed with that strategy, you're going to have the best opportunity to recover. And if we do get rain earlier than expected, you're going to be in a much better position. If things continue to stay dry, well, you've planned for that and you've got your strategy to deal with it. And so you're going to have the better opportunity to recover. Also, just finishing up here, there's a little bit of information there for various forms of assistance. One there that I'll refer to, the Rural Financial Counselling Service. They're also a great opportunity for those people that don't have a lot of skills in doing cash flow budgets. there's some people there that you can certainly get some advice from. But other than that, that's about it. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Jeff. So now's the time, people, if you have any questions, to type them in or to raise your hand. Jeff, I had a question. Now, you've calculated these break-even numbers here. Do you think, I mean, there's a lot of factors that can affect that. So that includes, you know, local conditions, statewide conditions, national conditions, but also international conditions. What do you think of the robustness, if I could call it that, of the sheep market, both wool and sheep meat, versus, say, the robustness of the cattle market?
Yeah, that's a good question, Todd. Well, firstly, just before I answer that, in terms of the market, I just want to say that some areas of the state are in better conditions than the other. The point is, though, we're all dealing with the same market because the drought is so widespread that there's potentially big differences in supply and demand. And as conditions get worse, supply in terms of animals coming on the market increases dramatically and the demand falls. So prices really start to increase. So while things might be good on your place, we obviously see the cost for feed is going up because there's a huge demand and supply is down. And as we see animals coming onto the market more, which we've seen in the past, but it's picked a bit because there's less animals coming on the market due to rain, we see the prices going up and down. So that's the first thing that everyone needs to be very clear on, is that it's a statewide drought and that has huge impacts on everyone's income and costs. In regards to the difference between sheep and cattle, there's not too many countries that export sheep meat and also wool. And so obviously, in terms of sheep meat, lambs and mutton, markets have been strong for a long time, and there's nothing to really say that that's going to change. And so one would expect that with the increased value of wool now, that the demand for sheep is just getting stronger and stronger all the time, because there's really good income earning potential there. In regards to cattle prices have been strong for the last couple of years. I'd actually expected cattle prices to come back a fair bit more than they have, given, you know, America coming much stronger back into the market. But surprisingly, prices have held quite strong here in Australia, which is a really positive sign. And it's probably, I'm no market analyst, but I'm sort of thinking, again, that's tied up that we don't have a big supply here in Australia, and so due to the drought, and so that's sort of you know, kept prices up a bit. But I would certainly say that I would expect that the value of sheep markets will be much greater than with meat markets.
Thanks, Jeff.